Welcome to Tea Witch Treats, and welcome 2022. Let's start this tenuous new year off with a bake that, judging by the recipe, I would have never attempted. Calissons from the 16th century, created in honor of the reputed seer Nostradamus. I began by making candied citrus fruits. The recipe called for candied melons as well, but I only needed about 3/4 of a cup, and that seemed like more work than necessary. I'm a very practical baker, and besides, did they have 7 different kinds of exotic fruit to mix into cookies in the 16th century? Probably not. As I cut up these citrus fruits to be candied, let's learn a little bit about Nostradamus then. He was actually called Michael de Nostradam, usually Latinized as Nostradamus. He was a French astrologer, a physician, and like I said, a reputed seer who was best known for his book, Les Prophéties. This was a collection of 942 poems, which allegedly predicted future events. The first book was published in 1555 and has predicted true events in history, but that's probably coincidence. Described as the prophet of doom, this French astrologer and doctor was inspired by biblical texts and his own experiences of plague, and more than 400 years after he published his book, Nostradamus' work remains popular because his predictions are open entirely to different meanings and interpretations, so anyone can put them to any situation. So let's see what Nostradamus had for the new year. What prophecies? Apparently the power of AI technology for the year 2022. Mass starvation. Nostradamus wrote, "No abbots, monks, no novices to learn. Honey shall cost far more than candle wax. So high the price of wheat that man is stirred, his fellow man to eat in his despair." I will be eating in his despair these extremely difficult cookies. As I peel these almonds, I can't help but think of the other 2 predictions that Nostradamus made for the year 2022. The first is an asteroid strike, which we know we've been avoiding one for decades. And 2 is global warming. Nostradamus said for 40 years the rainbow will not be seen. For 40 years it will be seen every day. The dry earth will grow more parched, and there will be great floods when it is seen. Moving into the second day, I decided to do a little craft with the orange leftover bits. They almost looked like little mushroom tops, and I couldn't resist. I then began with my mortar and pestle, grinding the almonds that I had let rest overnight. Do not be fooled. This took an extremely long time, despite the magic in the video. I tend to do everything by hand, which normally takes me longer, and I work harder, but I'm left very satisfied with my bakes in the end, because I know that I put love into every single bit of it. Another pot of tea, and finishing off the second day of baking, I will be making the flatbread. The recipe calls for pre-packaged matzah-like bread, but of course, I wanted to work harder than is necessary. I placed the dough to cook it in a skillet, but I kept it here in the oven overnight. It was looking pretty good. We jump into the 3rd day of baking. Once I had all of my ingredients combined, my dough rolled out and cut. I cut up the little pieces of the bread, and I began working at night. To finish off these very laborious cookies, I took a piece of the bread and I placed a Calisson on top and dipped it in icing sugar. I only did 2 dozen of the Calissons with the traditional bread on the bottom, as my family was extremely crazy about them on all of them. As I was glazing each individual cookie, I began to have this overwhelming desire to make it look like a giant bowl of cereal. So that's exactly what I did. My Calissons don't look anything like the books. They look a little bit like tater tots, but that's okay. On the last day of baking, I chose to do something pretty simple. The Bastion sandwiches from the Neverending story. You know, the "no, not too much, we still have a long way to go" sandwiches. 1 last pot of tea before the end, Meyer lemon and white peach. When Bastion Balthazar Bucks opens the Neverending story in his school's attic, he has no idea that this book will change his life forever. Setting himself up under a blanket beside a candle, he begins reading the book with 2 serpents on the cover, snacking on his afternoon sandwich cookies and sharing in the adventures of Atreyu and Falcor. Laughing, trembling, and eating along with them, he becomes closer and closer to the story, so close that he ends up in the book himself. The cookies, once sticky, after drying out completely overnight, are now firm and also very soft to the touch. I'm surprised that I actually like the bread on the underneath of the Calisson. It is a different type of cookie, one that I would never have baked before if not for this challenge and book. I feel grateful and humbled that I could do something that, even though it didn't look like the picture, still tasted wonderful. The Bastion sandwich was wonderful, but I can't finish it because we still have a long way to go. I would like to say thank you to Aurelia Beaupalmier, who wrote the Wizards Dessert Cookbook and who I owe my next year of baking to. I hope you enjoyed watching. Stay safe, stay witchy, drink lots of tea. We'll see you next time.